Before the time of the NES's surge to popularity with RPGs such as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, RPGs focusing on storytelling mostly came from the West, like the Wizardry series and Ultima. This was around the time a small company named Falcom released what would in the future become one of the most popular and critically acclaimed series of the genre. In 1987, with director Masaya Hashimoto and scenario writer Tomoyashi Miyazaki, the Ys series was born. Releasing to the PC 8801 in Japan and soon ported over to many other platforms such as the MSX2 in Japan and the Master System for the North American release. Ancient Ys Vanished was classified as a story-focused action RPG which featured the hero Adol in his quest to find the 6 books of Ys which contained the history of this ancient land. But that's a story for another time. We're going further back, to the real origin of the legend of Ys, to a time before Adol, where demons roamed the land freely, where the only safe place for humanity was the floating temple of Solomon's Shrine. Ys Origin launched in Japanese retailers on December 21, 2006 for the PC, and only finally receiving an English release in May 2012 by developer Xseed Games, known for their close work with translating and releasing many of Falcom's games stateside, doing an amazing work with their latest releases Trails in the Sky 2nd Chapter and Trails of Cold Steel 2, both of which sport monumental amounts of text to translate and maintain coherent with their original entries. Origin goes back 700 years in time to tell us the story of the twin goddesses Rhea and Fina in their quest to cleanse the land using the power of an artifact called the Black Pearl, to restore the surviving citizens to the land of Ys by purging it from the demons that plague it. Determined to eradicate mankind, the demons erected a gigantic tower from which they could plan their assault on Solomon's Shrine, using the power of the Devil's Tower to bring the floating temple back down within reach. The goddesses snook out of Solomon's Shrine amidst the chaos without warning, descending to the surface. Though nobody really knew their intentions, there was only one place they could have possibly gone in the desolate confines of the land of Ys: the Devil's Tower. This is where we meet Yunica and Hugo, our two protagonists, which we can choose immediately upon starting the game. Their paths are the same, though the dialogue and story exposition is entirely different for both, with the common story goals still there. Both are there to save the goddesses, though with different motivations. Yunica is your typical melee fighter who wields a variety of magic spells according to the equipped weapon. She has 3 elements at her disposal and 2 different weapons to choose from: the axe, which can either be air or lightning element, and the sword, which uses the fire element. Elemental attacks in this game play a large role as to what kind of enemy you're fighting and what element is more useful on any given situation. Some areas require you to even use a given element to facilitate progression through certain terrain or to activate faraway switches. While Yunica's gameplay focuses mainly on melee attacks and mid-range magic damage, Hugo's playstyle greatly differs, and can be considered more challenging to newcomers of the franchise, focusing on more calculated positioning with its trapmine ability, a force shield which lets you guard against some more powerful attacks, and Flame Wheel replaces your basic attack and makes your Eyes of Fact orbit Hugo for damage in a small area around you. His burst also adds more Eyes of Fact to his basic attack, covering a much wider area for a short period of time, and ultimately ends up having a much stronger version of Force Shield as his ultimate burst. Hugo is pretty much a second playthrough character, in my opinion. You'll find greater enjoyment in playing Yunica first if you're familiar with the action style of the previous Ys games. There is a third unlockable character, but I won't spoil it for you. All I can say is the combat with it is much more dodge-oriented. With a lower health pool, you'll have to expertly dodge attacks in fear of being KO'd with extreme ease. This third character is a really fun and challenging new way to play the game all over, and has a slightly different story to follow, although it's pretty much the same content. You'll want to go for a second playthrough, at the very least, to try this one out. Boss fights are an absolute treat to anyone playing the Ys series, as they are usually the most well-designed aspect of the game. Each boss works as sort of a Zelda boss fight, with the element you acquire before the boss up until a certain floor being the most effective tool to take them out. Bosses have very well choreographed patterns and will act accordingly to your playstyle. If you're playing from a distance, the boss will react differently than when you're fighting it head-on. The patterns are sometimes randomized as well, making you care for your surroundings and punishing you for not reading a boss telegraph correctly, leading to plenty of game over screens. But the satisfaction of beating a boss after so many failed attempts in this game is just as good as defeating any boss in Dark Souls. Beating the boss will advance the story and will let you progress to the upper floors and so on and so forth. Don't be fooled by this though, as sometimes you will be asked to backtrack or explore certain areas that were inaccessible before and yield greater difficulty enemies and new items to acquire. Exploring the extra areas while progressing through the floors rewards you handsomely with weapon tampering upgrades and items that upgrade your gear or upgrade your weapon's element. Overall, the game is a very well-made action RPG with some amazing soundtrack and punishing mechanics that can also be satisfying and rewarding for you to play with skill, besides just mashing buttons and mindlessly killing what's in front of you. The game is well worth playing more than once, if not for the extra difficulty settings you unlock after completing the game the first time around. And if that wasn't enough, you can also unlock time attack mode and arena mode after beating the game, which you can complete with Adol, the hero from the main series. The only glaring flaws I can point in the game is that the camera isn't the most amazing for platforming. The game relies heavily on platforming segments to progress and hide items, and the camera here does a disservice to the player. With the 2D sprites and 3D terrain, there's a big lack of depth perception with the exception of your shadow. Ys Origin gets a rating of Platinum. It's a very thoroughly entertaining experience, and takes just the right amount of time to complete, at around 10 hours for the first playthrough, finding every secret for that character. The platforming gripes could have been avoided, but the action sequences and extremely well-made boss fights make it a very solid action RPG with a killer soundtrack to accompany it. Thank you for watching my review of Ys Origin. Have you ever played a game from this series? Leave a comment below and share the video if you enjoyed the review. Also be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. I really appreciate the support everyone's been giving me these past few videos on the channel, and I really want to make more quality content for you all. This has been Zeldrak, and I'll see you next time.